identified 2 other people that handled and or inspected the loaded firearm prior to Baldwin firing the weapon. These 2 individuals are Armorer Hannah Reed Gutierrez and Assistant Director David Halls. All 3 individuals have been cooperative in the investigation and have provided statements. The actual lead projectile that was fired has been recovered from the shoulder of Mr. Souza. We regard this specific spent casing and recovered projectile to be the live round that was fired from the revolver by Mr. Baldwin. We have recovered what we believe to be possible additional live rounds on set.
Hello and well.
So that actually came out October 27. That information came out around about 6 days after the incident, which is pretty soon. And I think you could say, why has it taken so long, right? And I think there's an argument for that. But I think another aspect is how many of us saw this. How do they say it? Saw it in the tea leaves to begin with, right? And I want to actually look at what you guys have said, voted in the poll. Make sure you do vote if you haven't already. By the way, hi everybody. If this side of my cheek looks a little swollen, it is a little bit tender, so I'm not going to be on live here for the usual length of time. Probably won't be much longer than 60 to 90 minutes. So please bear with me. Let's have a look at some of the comments. No, not tarot cards. Now, I'm just talking about where you sort of see something. It's kind of a metaphor for, you see it in the woodwork kind of thing. Raven says, I voted but haven't read your piece yet, so it's still up in the air in my mind. But I mean, in terms of your own mind, what did you think right in the beginning? What did you think after you heard Alec Baldwin's interview with ABC News? Also, whatever you thought all along, right? Let's have a look at what you guys have said. I'm just going to play this while I'm looking for it.
Whether Rust will be abandoned, the movie, and will Alec Baldwin be abandoned? Because his PR battle for public support continues. Do you think he's winning that battle? Within the last few hours, Alec Baldwin posted a memo written by his crew to his 2.4 million followers on Instagram. The 2-page memo defends Baldwin and the crew without explicitly mentioning him, basically saying how wonderful conditions on the set were. It's addressed to no one in particular, but one supposes to whom it may concern, basically means us, everyone. So before we get started on today.
So let me ask you guys, do you think that Rust should go ahead? Do you think where we are now, the fact that they've laid charges against him, which is now ammunition for those people who've launched lawsuits, that gives them added authority and reinforcement to what they are claiming, in terms of negligence or whatever. But do you think the movie should just go ahead? In other words, Baldwin should be, a gun should be placed in his hand again, and he should go back into the church just with a different cinematographer, and they should just sort of carry on where they left off. Do you think that should be the case? What do you guys think about that? Deborah says, I don't think Rush should go ahead. On the other hand, if Baldwin had said, mea culpa, I made a mistake, whatever. But I'm just saying, like what you've got on screen right there is kind of like the whole crew basically saying, no, we didn't do anything wrong. I don't know where you got that crazy idea. We didn't do anything wrong. Can we just get back to making our movie? I don't know what all the fuss is about. Should they be allowed to do that, given where we are now? Because the authorities haven't said you didn't do anything wrong, right? Okay, so let's look at the poll. Make sure you vote if you haven't already. 5% say Alec is innocent. 60% say called it from day one, 59%. 25%, a quarter of you say it's the armorer that's guilty. And 11% say it's not an actor's job to check the gun. I hope by the end of this live stream, everyone those 10% who've said it's not the actor's job to check the gun, I hope by the end of this analysis, you're never ever going to say that again. It is the actor's job. It's part of the protocol on a movie set for the actor handling the gun to check the gun, right? The fact that it's taken so long for that bit of information to be asserted, and it has been asserted, and people still don't know that. It's not the actor's job to do it. It is the actor's job. So I hope by the end of this analysis, those of you who have been repeating that over and over and over and over again are going to stop repeating that and say, oh, you know what? Actually, it is the actor's job to do that. It's not legally or morally speaking, it's the actor's job on a movie set based on the rules of a movie set to do that. It's the protocols on a movie set to do that. And other actors know that, like George Clooney and Nicolas Cage and Jensen Ackles, who was also on this production. By the way, the image you see behind me is from one of the co-actors, one of the other actors, the co-stars. It's Jensen from Jensen Ackles' Instagram. I think Jensen Ackles was in Smallville. If he is the guy I'm thinking of, he's a really good actor in that. Yes, that's true. Tina, we don't really want to see that sort of thing. Alec is guilty! ! We still have the presumption of innocence, and we at the same stage right now with the in this case with the Koberger case and also the Murdoch case. That has got to be tested in a court of law. So there's probable cause, but he nevertheless has the presumption of innocence. So let's make sure. Mods as well. I don't really want to see Alec Baldwin is guilty! ! The law enforcement have probable cause, and that's really what we're going to be talking about. Does that make sense? Okay. By the way, I just want to thank Stephanie for a comment you posted a few minutes ago on Patreon. You just said something about it's been amazing how you have literally found your way in the dark. And I just thought that was such a cool insight using my own symbology into my situation. I really appreciate that. By the way, the peach trees outside they doubled in size just this season, just this summer. So I will actually be showing you guys something about that on the Peachtree channel. I'm also going to be showing you 2 weaver nests that this yellow weaver's built in the past day or so. Not 1, but 2. So just remind me if I don't show you to show you those photos. Thanks, Stephanie. Okay, shall we get started with today's analysis? And so what we're going to deal with are the involuntary manslaughter charging documents, right? And there are actually 12 safety violations on the day of the shooting alone. Did you guys know that? 12 safety violations And I think that's besides what Baldwin did, just in terms of the protocols on that day. For example, there wasn't a mandatory daily safety briefing before anything happened that day. That didn't happen either, right? Did you know that? Did you know that on a film set you need a mandate, you have a daily safety briefing? Did you guys know that? Thanks very much, Liesel. I worked really hard on that video and I really wanted it to reach a lot of people. But the same applies in terms of this case, in all the other cases. All of these people were people, and we need to remember that. We need to remember their humanity. We need to remember our humanity, right? Okay, so we're going to start off with. So I'm going to take you guys through 20 main points from the probable cause affidavit, right? 20 main points. And then I'm going to take you through 4 additional points that I've highlighted from the 551-page investigative report, right? So we're really going to go through 24 different points. And so I'm going to kind of get going and kind of get through that. So we had about 12 minutes, and let's go through those 24 points now. So although Baldwin claims to have been blindsided, wow, I didn't see this coming, and I think his lawyer called it a total miscarriage of justice in terms of the charges against him. To be honest, I would have been extremely surprised if Baldwin and the armorer weren't charged personally. And I think, according to the poll, 62% of you would have been surprised as well. Is that right? Now, before we deal with the document, I want to deal with the people who have commented that because what Baldwin did was determined to be an accident. I keep seeing this comment over and over again, but it was an accident. It was an accident, so that's it, case closed. It just shows a very simple, reductionist, and incorrect understanding of the law. Baldwin and the armorer weren't charged because it appeared they didn't break any rules or protocols or laws, but because they did. If you think they didn't, maybe it's because you don't understand the law. Maybe it's because you don't understand the protocols on movie sets. And if you are open-minded, this analysis right now is going to help you understand those protocols, right? So if all along you felt, no, but it's an accident, it's not an actor's job. What we're going to go through now should set the record straight in your mind where you realize, oh, I didn't realize that, right? So think about it, just as owning a vehicle and ensuring it's roadworthy, right? Just think about that. Your vehicle can kill another person if you're not careful. Your vehicle can kill you if you're not careful. It can kill someone else in a vehicle. It can kill a pedestrian, right? And so you need to maintain that vehicle. You've got to make sure that the tires are, have appropriate tread, that the brakes work, that you can see through the windscreens, all that kind of thing. In other words, you need to maintain certain safety precautions with your vehicle and also with yourself, right? It's to protect you, but it's also to protect other people. And then collectively, we are all looking out for one another. And the same kind of applies in a movie set. You are obeying certain safety protocols to protect you, but also to protect other crew members, right? Does that make sense? So the same applies to firearms and any other thing that has the potential to kill people if proper care isn't taken. I mean, another example is scuba diving. If you go scuba diving, there's certain precautions you can take. And if you're reckless, bad things can happen. Okay, so let's go to this first page. These are obviously the original documents. Shall I read this one? Let me do it like that. Okay, State of New Mexico, County of Santa Fe, plaintiff versus Alec Baldwin, defendant. Now, what is quite interesting is you've got this whole crew, and out of the crew, they've only chosen 2 people, right? Just Alec Baldwin and the armorer. Why is that? And is that correct? Count 1, involuntary manslaughter. On or about October 21, 2021, the above named defendant did cause the death, right? They're saying Alec Baldwin caused the death of Alina Hutchins, committed in the commission of an unlawful act, to wit, negligent use of a deadly weapon, right? So even if it was unintentional, even if it was accidental, there was nevertheless negligence. And it's kind of what I've been saying all along, not just negligence in terms of the act itself, but negligence in the context surrounding that. And that's exactly what this document highlights. Okay, so I'm not going to read the rest of that. Let's go on to the next page. Statement of probable cause. Okay, I'm going to just put the first point on screen. By the way, if you're hearing snoring, it's my dog. It's not me breathing heavily. Okay, can you guys see the statement next to me? So, background synopsis, statement of probable cause. On October 21, a shooting involving a handgun or revolver occurred that resulted in the death of Alina Hutchins and a serious injury to the director, Joel Souza. The shooting involved a .45 caliber revolver and occurred on a Western movie set located in rural Santa Fe County. On this date, being filmed and or rehearsed at this location was a film at the time referred to as Rust. Through interview statements and evidence, it was learned that defendant Alec Baldwin was the lead actor in the film, right? So if you make the comment, and if you've been making the comment, it's not an actor's job to do X, Y, Z. Well, first of all, he wasn't just any actor, he was the lead actor, right? Anyway, we'll come back to that. Anyway, it says through these interviews and statements and physical evidence, it was also learned. So, by that you might say, what are you talking about? So what if he's the lead actor? So the question is, why did this actor and not any other actor get charged, right? It's a fair question. If you say, you know what, it's not an actor's job to do this, and then you say, well, they charged this actor. Why did they charge this actor, not any other actor? What do you think the answer is to that? Why didn't they just not charge all the actors who handle firearms? Mel Stiller says he was the head honcho, the money man, the producer. Teresa says he was the boss responsible for everything and everyone. Let's look at what the language is of the affidavit in terms of this, right? So it goes on to say, through these interviews, can you guys see this? Let me try and blow this text up here. It's not, because this is really, really important. Can you see where my cursor is right at the bottom line? Can you see, due to interview statements and physical evidence, it was learned that Baldwin was involved in and named as a primary producer of the film, right? So is that relevant? Can you make the argument that it's not an actor's job to blah, 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 blah? Okay, but he wasn't just an actor, he was the lead actor. He wasn't just the lead actor, he was the primary producer of the film. And does the word primary mean anything? Does the word primary mean anything? And by the same token, you could say, oh, if they're going to charge producers, why don't they charge all the other producers? So by the same token, you say, oh, if they're going to charge an actor, why didn't they charge all the other actors? Well, he was the actor holding the gun when it went off. If they're going to charge a producer, why don't they charge the other producers? He was the lead actor and primary producer. In other words, he was kind of the leader of this entire operation. He was the originator, right? He wrote the script and he was the main character. And he was probably the most experienced and rich and influential person on set, right? So that word, primary producer, is important. And I think that's an aspect that Baldwin himself has sort of been minimizing is, yeah, I was just a producer. I just had creative input. Yeah, kind of thing. I was just one of the crew. No. You were the centerpiece of this entire movie. In fact, the name of this movie is named after your character, right? Exactly. So if you say, who's responsible? Part of the answer is, well, who is in charge? And then you say, was the person in charge pushing safety, or were they not pushing safety? Well, what do you think happened at the time that Helena died? Was somebody pushing safety at that time? Okay. So, as you would expect, Baldwin's responsibility wasn't merely as an actor on a set. This was a cowboy movie. This wasn't like, I don't know, Tootsie or Taxi or whatever. This was, or Mrs. Doubtfire, right? This was a cowboy movie featuring gunfights, and Baldwin, who's an experienced actor, veteran actor, more experienced than I think any of the other actors on set in terms of this aspect. He was not only the lead actor, but also the primary producer of the film. The film, and this is crucial, was his baby. It was named after the main character and a character played by him. Besides this, even if Baldwin was a green actor, right? And this is quite important to stress, even if he was a green actor and it was his very first role, and you could say the same of Hannah Gutierrez Reed, even if she was a green armorer, she was still expected to follow the rules, right? It doesn't really matter if you're a veteran, except that it matters more that a veteran should know this. But there's no excuse, even if you're a green actor or a green armorer, you should know what the rules are on a movie set, right? So why was it that other actors on the same set, like Jensen Ackles, knew to do their own weapons checks? And they did. They did know and they did do them. So how come they knew? How come they knew and did them, and how come Baldwin didn't seem to know and didn't seem to do them? So that brings us to the next page. I don't know if you guys can read that. Okay, I'm going to just deal with the highlights here. So the first point is Baldwin wasn't just an actor on Rust, right? So if he wasn't just the actor, what was he? He was also the primary producer, and that gives him certain responsibilities. Okay, that's good, Dover and Dolly's mom. And that's right, there are rules for a reason. And that's such a good point. There are rules for a reason. And I think this whole sad story shows exactly why there are rules and what happens when you don't follow those rules to the letter. Yvonne, good day from Australia. I mean, good day. Okay. So the fact that the weapon did fire suggests someone was fooling around, or that the weapon miraculously fired itself, right? Let me say that again. The fact that the weapon did fire suggests that either someone was fooling around because the weapon can't just fire itself, or the weapon miraculously did fire itself? Which one is that more likely to be? Do you agree that the thought must have occurred to you or to someone at some point? Did this happen because someone was messing around? Someone was sort of almost like ad-libbing, but in terms of holding a gun and kind of fooling around with it, right? So did you guys know that the point of the rehearsal wasn't to fire the weapon? But the other thing is, when you have a rehearsal means the camera's not rolling. Also, it means they are not really shooting. They are simply practicing. And I think Baldwin himself sort of acknowledged that you try and find your mark, right? You know where to stand and where to point and where to look and all that kind of thing. All of that is done in rehearsal. Rehearsal is not the same as a take. It's totally different. And so the rules that apply to a rehearsal are also totally different. And I don't know if you know this, when you are shooting a rehearsal, this really applies to all the people who have been saying something about an actor's job is not to check the weapon. Well, the rules say that during a rehearsal, the actor may not actually even be holding a weapon. In other words, when there's a rehearsal, the actor must be given a replica or a fake gun, because it's totally not even necessary to have a real gun in that situation. Also, it's not necessary to even load it. So that whole thing that they were having a rehearsal and then it was loaded with dummy rounds was totally not even necessary, right? Thanks a lot, Setlick3. Thank you. Did you guys know that? So, I mean, that's a really important point to establish. The setup when Helena was shot was a rehearsal, and in that rehearsal situation, he shouldn't even have been holding a real gun. That's based on the rules. Okay, the point of the rehearsal was really only to get a close-up shot of the weapon, just to get an idea. That's the angle that we want, right? It didn't even need to be loaded with dummy rounds in the first place. The affidavit clearly notes that even the scene for which they were rehearsing, right? This is really important. And it's very easy to forget this in the fine print. The scene for which they were rehearsing, right? This wasn't shooting the scene. Actually, this wasn't doing a take for the scene. This was rehearsing, preparing for that scene. And that scene didn't require Baldwin to actually pull the trigger. And you may remember that Mamie Mitchell said right in the beginning that she said that exact thing. She said that the script didn't call for him to pull the trigger. So why did he pull the trigger? And then he would say, I didn't pull the trigger. But if he did pull the trigger and it wasn't called for in the script, then what are we dealing with? So this again suggests that someone was possibly doing something for fun, right? Someone was going off script for fun, or that the gun guards intervened and made the gun magically discharge. So let's now deal with the third point. Let's deal with the third point. According to the rules, in a rehearsal scenario, a plastic or replica with no round should be used. Did you know that? So if they'd simply followed this rule, just this rule, an accident could have been avoided. If they'd given him a plastic or a replica, then the whole thing would have been avoided. Also, whether someone was trying to be a comedian or whether the guards pulled the trigger, if it was a fake gun with no rounds, there would be no risk anyway, right? So I'm going to put this onto screen just for a moment until we come up with the next page. Okay. Number 4, since a live round was extracted from the director's shoulder that same day, why was there any talk of wadding or firing a blank round to begin with? So it wasn't like it took days, weeks, or months to find out what happened. You just heard in the clip that I played right in the beginning, within 6 days, law enforcement already making public statements that they knew where the live round came from, and they actually knew where the live round came from right when Baldwin was sitting there. Right, in other words, they were able to show him a picture that same afternoon, within hours. That's what came out of Sousa's shoulder, and then later, around about that time, he was also told that Helena's died, right? So why on earth, if you knew on the first day, within hours, would you then go onto ABC News and talk about wadding when you knew it wasn't wadding? Does that make sense? If you knew very early on that this wasn't a case of a dummy round or a wadding incident, then why tell that story? Dover says, no one has explained how all the live rounds got mixed around the place. You're going to find out now, or if you haven't, or if you don't, let me know, because you should know by the end of this. Okay. Again, it didn't take the medical examiner days or months to determine. This is the medical examiner, right? It didn't take them days or months to determine what happened. Bear in mind, Baldwin went onto ABC News in December. So the entire month of November went by. So hasn't it become abundantly clear what happened? Like, isn't his job to go onto ABC News and say, you know what, this is what happened. Don't tell us what didn't happen, or what you thought happened, or what you couldn't imagine happened. What did happen? Is that what he did? So the medical examiner's report came out the very next day. Think about the Kylie Rodney case, how long that took. Think about even the Idaho case, how long that took. This report came out the very next day, and the cause of death was gunshot wound to the chest. There was no rocket science needed. There was no sophisticated investigation. How did the bullet fire itself? Was it some kind of half wadding, blah, blah, blah? No. It's pretty straightforward what happened here, right? And that brings us to number 5. And this is something that I went to great pains to emphasize again and again and again in my coverage, right? I was saying it's not just what happened at that moment, right? In other words, if you say it was an accident, or if you say it's not an actor's job, blah, blah, blah. I spent a lot of time in the 90 plus episodes of analysis I took great pains to show the culture of carelessness that seemed to be taking place, right? In other words, it wasn't just an accident that moment, and the way that he describes it, a 1 in a billion. Wasn't it an accident waiting to happen? And I'm a little bit surprised that those words don't actually appear in the probable cause affidavit. But anyway, here's number 5. What do you know? There were safety violations prior to October 21st. And that's the narrative that is being drowned out by the repeated thing of the only question is, how did a live round get into the only question is who loaded it? No. That's not the only question. The question is, what is the culture of safety on the set? What is your attitude to safety on the set? What was your attitude really to safety on the set, right? And so when something happened that was a safety issue, what did you do about it? And then something else happened that was a safety issue and said, what did you do about it? And then something else happened, what did you do about it? And so you can quickly say there were several accidental discharges. Even on the day that this incident happened, 6 members of the crew walked off, citing safety issues. What did you do about that? Did you have a safety briefing? Like, jeepers, some people in the crew are worried about this. Let's do something about that. Let's address that. So if something is brought to your attention as the primary producer, as the lead actor, as an influential funder, or whatever you want to call it, right? Did you help the safety? Did you help to address safety issues, or did you not do that? Did your actions lead to a culture of safety and a more careful approach, or did your attitude actually lead to the opposite? No, don't worry, it's the armorer's job. So as Stephanie says, it does look like there was a number, it's not just one thing, a whole number of negligent actions or omissions, things that they didn't do, that seemed to cumulatively build up to something that looked like it was eventually going to be inevitable, right? Okay, so now we go into the next page here. I don't know if you guys can read that. Can you see that? Okay, let me do it like so. Okay, so I don't know where it is here, where it says Baldwin was given minimal training. So I actually think that's on the previous page. Or is it here? Baldwin had there it is. Baldwin had very limited training. Can you see that? So in the deposition taken from Reed, she stated Baldwin had very limited training on the cross draw that was required for the scene. So he had very limited training on the actual maneuver that he performed when he actually shot Helena. And also over there, also limited training in firearms and how to check his own firearm as to whether it was loaded or unloaded, which Reed felt was very important in his role as Rust. And here you see a training session for at least an hour or more than an hour in length was scheduled, but the actual training consisted of only approximately 30 minutes. Why? Because according to Reed, Baldwin was distracted and talking on his cell phone to his family during the training. Now, a statement like that, she may need to be able to prove. They may need to be able to say, on that day, were there calls to him at that particular time? So that may need to be verified, right? So that's the bottom line, is Baldwin was given minimal training. So again, if you say, what responsibility does he have as the primary producer, as the lead actor, as the originator of this whole idea, right? And then you see this idea that he's not training the full amount of time. And we know that he was, and I'm quite surprised it's not in here. One of the line managers, I think, said no more weapons training for Alec, right? And I think she kind of garbled that, where it sounded like she'd said trading days and she meant training days. But I mean, that what made it quite explicit. He's had enough training, no more, stop bugging him about it. I'm surprised it didn't make it into this. So do you see minimal training in terms of cross draw, the thing that he did on the 21st that led to this incident? And he was also given limited training on how to check his own weapon. Even where Baldwin did attend weapons training, he was distracted and took calls. So that brings us to number 6. Do you think Baldwin tried to gaslight the public? It's a question. In other words, and I'm talking about what he was saying. In other words, he would go into ABC News and he would tell us what the rules are on a film set. And he would say, no, it's not the actor's job to check the gun. And isn't that exactly what everyone has said? You know what? It's not the actor's job to check the gun. Well, how do you know? Well, because Alec Baldwin said that. Yeah, but he's the suspect in this case. What do other people say? Right? So what do you think about that? Okay, so let's go back to the poll. Did you predict this outcome? Charges against Alec Baldwin from the beginning. 59% say you called it from day one. 60%. Okay, we're still at that level. Aloha to Iceland from Hawaii. Good to have you with us. One of our newest mods. Iceland Odette, welcome. Okay. So in terms of this idea of gaslighting the public, the affidavit refers to many inconsistent accounts about the incident made by Baldwin over the course of several statements. Does that ring true to you? Like, did you get the sense that Baldwin made inconsistent statements? For example, who gave him the gun? Was it the armorer or Dave Halls? Who said to him cold gun? Etc., etc. So let's have a look at the actual text. Can you guys see that? It's a little bit blurry. Let me bring it. Can you guys read that? Baldwin later asserted that he never fired the revolver and that it had just gone off. Baldwin made this assertion in public as well, in multiple media interviews conducted after the shooting. Many media interviews and law enforcement interviews were conducted by Baldwin, and he displayed very inconsistent accounts. It's not just inconsistent, very inconsistent accounts of what happened during the incident when firing the gun that killed Hutchins. Now, I think what this is really getting at is that what was inconsistent was what he said in the media interviews compared to what he said to law enforcement. And that was something that I also try to draw your attention to, because I obviously paid a lot of attention to the ABC News interview, but also to the others. And then I also paid attention to what he said to law enforcement. But by the time that came out, it was almost like people were suffering from ADD. I think it was when that came out, the Depp versus Heard case came on. And so it was almost like people didn't even pay attention or didn't even care about that. I remember thinking, wow, this is huge. This is going to be a breakthrough thing. And nobody really seemed to care because so much time had gone by. And you kind of have a similar thing with the Ramsey statements. There's a lot of these inconsistencies, and they should be like red flag, red flag, red flag. But because they're separated by so much time, a certain amount of amnesia and laziness sets in, where you start just to think like, I can't actually remember what they said. I can't really remember what happened. And the way to deal with that is you juxtapose those statements side by side. You put them side by side. On that date, he said that. On that date, he said that. On that date, he said this. On that date, he said that. On that date, he said this. On that date, he said that. In other words, is there tailoring of the statement? And you on the other side might think, I'm not really sure what he's saying, but you can bet that he knows what he's trying to say. He knows what his position is on whatever it is, right? And I think you can kind of ask that question, was he trying to gaslight the public or was he gaslighting the public? I think you can ask it in two ways. The one is, was he just trying to tell his version of events and it amounted to gaslighting? In other words, just sort of accidental? Or was it something else, like a deliberate gaslighting, like an influence campaign? Was it a step-by-step reinforcing of a particular narrative during this long process where law enforcement are sort of muzzled? Law enforcement can't say anything. And so while law enforcement can't say anything, I'm going to tell my story over and over and over again. And what comes out of all of that? It's not an actor's job to check the weapon. It's not an actor's job to check the weapon. It's not an actor's job to check the weapon. A year later, I don't understand this. It's not an actor's job to check the weapon. Based on that actor telling you, the actor at the center of the investigation telling you that. Timmy, I'm going to put you down. Timmy, say hello. Okay. Chris Widman, good to have you here. Thank you. Lorraine says plastic should have been used. Yeah. Okay. So now we go into number 7. We've got 20 of these to go through. We about a third of the way. Despite Baldwin's public claims, video emerged showing Baldwin's finger inside the trigger guard while performing a cross draw. And can you see how the details matter in true crime? So the details matter in terms of what did he say? What did he say in terms of what he was doing with his fingers? And then it's like not rocket science. What do you actually see in the footage? And you kind of got to wonder, did Baldwin assume we would never see that footage? I mean, it's kind of his footage, but did he assume we would never see it? And I am going to play it for you in a moment. Let me highlight that here. Despite Baldwin's public claims, video emerged showing Baldwin's finger inside the trigger guard, right? So, you know, this whole idea of I never pulled the trigger. And I remember when he was describing this on ABC News, I don't know this for a fact, but I seem to remember him saying his finger was nowhere near the trigger. But yet when he was demonstrating it, he kind of had his finger like this. So he had this finger here, and this one is here. Not like that. I don't know how you would hold it. But anyway, that was something that I thought about. And so I'm going to show you a clip of that in a moment, but I first want to show you this. Can you see that? So it says here, the photos and videos depict the above described actions of Baldwin prior to the shooting, practicing drawing and pointing the weapon. The photos and videos clearly show Baldwin multiple times with his finger inside of the trigger guard and on the trigger while manipulating the hammer and while drawing. And so I do think what's quite an interesting legal thing here, I don't think it needs to be this on the chin, but if Baldwin says you cannot prove that I pulled the trigger, I don't know whether he can prove that he didn't, meaning it's not like in that footage his finger's nowhere near the trigger, his finger's kind of like on the trigger, right? So that's besides the science of it. I'm just saying that there's actual video footage showing where his finger is, and I'm going to try and play that for you guys right now. Let's see if I can find it. I think it is this. So can you guys see that? Let me do it full screen and take that away. Can you see where his finger is? Now, there's something else I want to, I've been meaning to sort of direct your attention to. And I feel quite stupid that I didn't really notice this before. In this rehearsal footage, right? Look where he's pointing the gun in this still of it. Where do you think he's pointing the gun? Let me take it back slightly. So let's take it back just a bit further than that. A little bit. So can you see actually how clumsy this is? At this point, where do you think he's pointing the gun? And look at what happens over the next couple of seconds. Do you see how he points it and then it sort of goes like that? It's almost like, oh, sorry, I meant to point it there. Right? Do you think that the rehearsal, the script called for him to draw the gun and then point it somewhere else? I mean, just think about every cowboy movie you've ever seen. Does someone draw and then they point the gun somewhere else? Right? Let me play that again. What do you think's going on there? What do you think's going on where he draws very quickly and then he sort of pans the gun slightly to the other side? What do you think that's all about? Okay, the way I interpret that is that he draws it, he's trying to draw it as fast as possible to show what a lethal badass he is, right? He's trying to draw it as fast as possible, but what he does is he's not pointing it actually in the right direction because it's kind of quite tricky. You've got to put it out very, very quickly, and then it's got to instantly be pointing in the right direction vis-a-vis the camera, right? And what I see when I see that is when he pulls it out, is actually not pointing it the right way. So he sort of slowly points it where it does need to point. The other thing that I think I'm seeing, and I could be wrong, is when he draws it, maybe he doesn't mean to be pointing it at the person in front of him, but he is. And so what he's also doing is he's pointing it away from that person. What I'm trying to say is he's repeatedly cross-drawing and he's pointing it the wrong way because he hasn't had training in cross-drawing, right? And I think this is one of the crucial aspects to this whole case is if he had the cross-draw training with Hannah that he was supposed to have had, then there wouldn't have been all of this cross-drawing, right? He would have been better at it rather than he's now training at it without the armor even present. He's kind of training to get the shot done when he should have had this training with the armorer. The training, he was supposed to get cross-draw training. And as far as I know, either he had very little of it or none at all, right? And so can you see how, especially when you slow this down, he doesn't really know what he's doing. He doesn't like cross-draw and the gun's there. It's sort of, he cross-draws. Oh, sorry, I must point it over there. Do you see what I'm saying? Let's watch that a couple of times. And the incredible thing with this is, and I'm sorry I can't show it in a larger size, but you get the general idea. Let's take me away, okay. So what you're actually looking at are two cross draws, as far as I can make out. The first one he does almost over his nose. Let me, you see that? The first one, he kind of blocks out his own face. And doesn't it look to you like it's really not pointing the right way, right? It needs to be pointing almost, if I can bring myself back, it needs to be pointing almost the same way his nose is pointing, right? Kind of in front of him, right? And so when you play it a little bit further, now just burn that frame into your mind, just try and remember it. Look how it's actually going the wrong way. It's going in the wrong direction, right? And then he swings it the other way, right? And that's I think the direction that it's supposed to come out at, right? It's supposed to come out in that direction, right? So that's the first cross draw. Then he does the next one. And remember how the first one was over his face? Let's look at the next one. Can you see, is it not actually sure if it is different. Yeah, sorry, I thought there was going to be a definite difference there, but it could actually be the same thing we're seeing a couple of times. But the point is that he adjusts the direction that he's pointing it, and for the purposes of a lethal gunslinger, he would never do that. It would be draw, and now I've got you in my sights. Like draw, gotcha, right? And so that whole thing where he's moving it like that, he's not pointing it where it needs to be pointed. And so also the fact that he's training with a actual gun and it's loaded with you can say dummy rounds or whatever, he shouldn't be doing that. He should have been practicing with a plastic gun or whatever. And that is not like, that's my advice to you as a Monday morning quarterback. That is part of the rules, right? So something else that's really interesting is, remember there's talk of plinking. We're going to deal with that a little bit later. Okay, so as I said, I've been meaning to say this for some time. When you watch the video footage, Baldwin actually draws the gun that killed Helena. This footage is the moment before he killed her, right? This footage that you're seeing here is like literally moments before he killed her. It's literally like getting almost like cell phone footage of, let's say, the suspect in the Idaho case, practicing him drawing the knife or practicing going into the house, right? It's unheard of in true crime that you get this kind of quality up close evidence, right? It's unheard of, and that's why I'm sort of blown away. It's staggering that people don't find this case more compelling, because there's so much material here and people still don't understand what's going on. Anyway, so what you see is, we see him drawing the gun at the person right in front of him, and then he slowly seems to direct it away from her, right? Let me say that again. This footage is the moment before he actually kills her. And what we see is him drawing the gun at her. When he passes it like that, he's actually passing it in front of her and then slowly directs it away from her. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Terry, that's not really called for, that comment, right? So let me say that again. This footage is the moment before he actually killed Alina, before he shot her. And we see him drawing the gun sort of at her, towards her, and then it slowly moves across her, and then he directs it away from her. Do you agree with that assessment? Do you agree that he's moving it away, firstly because it's not the angle that she wanted, the original way that he brings it out, and the other thing is he's pointing it at her, right? Yeah, but the issue is at a certain point when he's doing that, he is aiming it at her, or the gun is pointing in her direction. And I would submit that he's moving it away so that it's no longer pointing in her direction. I don't think she said, hey, point the gun at me. One doesn't get the sense that she asked him to point the gun at him, sorry, at her, but rather that they were trying to capture, right? Let me say that again. I don't get the sense that she was saying, Alec, please point the gun at me. Rather, what they're trying to capture in this rehearsal was Harland Rust's lethal prowess. Look how good he is. Look how quick he is. Look at how he is the fastest gun in the West. Just look how fast this old timer was in his old age. That is the thing they were trying to convey in the scene. Not point the gun at me. They were trying to convey this, quick draw thing. That's what they were trying to convey. It's also possible that they wanted to get a close-up of the gun from the front. And again, I don't mean the gun pointing straight at you, but just the gun from a front angle, right? Okay. Number 8, the FBI tested Baldwin's outlandish claim that the gun in his hand fired itself, right? Do you guys know that? So he said, I never pulled the trigger. What did he say? I pulled out the gun and the gun went off. Or I released the hammer and the gun went off, something like that, right? So the FBI actually tested that, and that's in this report. That's from this page. And this is what they say. The revolver, can you guys read that? The revolver involved in the shooting was seized by detectives as evidence. It was later submitted to the FBI for examination and analysis. As part of that examination and analysis, the FBI conducted a malfunction check of the revolver. And so what they were trying to do, it involved trying to get the weapon to fire without the trigger being depressed. In other words, they were trying to simulate exactly what Baldwin claimed. They were trying to replicate, simulate, imitate that whole thing, that whole idea. And so they tried all sorts of things. They tried striking the hammer at various angles, right, against a solid object. They tried striking the hammer of the revolver even with a hammer and a mallet. They said no matter what they did, the revolver did not malfunction. In other words, it did not fire when it should not. It did not fire accidentally. They couldn't get it to fire accidentally. So they tried all sorts of different ways to try and get the gun to fire itself, right? And they said this analysis clearly showed that the weapon could not accidentally fire. And that then kind of raises this question when you come back to this, did Baldwin gaslight the public? Could Baldwin actually have pulled the trigger and then he said he didn't pull the trigger? Now, I think, again, you've got two possibilities. Did he pull the trigger and he didn't know he pulled the trigger? And you can imagine when you're doing that fast draw, you may not intentionally pull the trigger, but because you're doing this kind of unusual motion and he wasn't very practiced at it, maybe he did unintentionally pull the trigger, right? So maybe it's true if he says, I didn't intentionally pull the trigger, right? The other side is to say, I didn't pull the trigger. Well, then how did the gun go off? That's the other side of it. To say, as a confident, absolute statement, I didn't pull the trigger. Well, then how did the gun go off? So let me put that up as point number 8. And that was something we always said was an outlandish claim. Every gun expert said guns can't just fire themselves. There's a tiny possibility that if the mechanisms and gears are really worn down, and there's a tiny possibility that it might happen, right? But that wasn't the case here. Okay. Number 9, Baldwin's claim that a bullet discharged without him actually cocking the hammer, I think, acknowledges limited understanding of firearms. Either that or his assumption is of our limited understanding. So what I'm trying to get at is, if you say, well, I didn't cock the hammer far enough where the bullet would then move in the cylinder into position, right? I don't know if you're following what I'm saying. How it works is when you cock the hammer, that process brings another round into position in order for it to be fired. Now, if you say, I didn't cock the hammer far enough back for that to happen, then how can a bullet even be fired in a situation like that? If you don't even have that mechanism where the round is moving, right, then how can it fire? I don't know if you guys are following what I'm saying. Cotton Star says, why was there live ammo at all on the set? We are going to address that. I mean, it's a good question. There shouldn't have been. I'm also surprised that this probable cause affidavit mentions 6 rounds when there was actually, as far as I'm aware, many more rounds than that. But I think some of those rounds were live rounds they found at PD Prop and Arms and Prop. Okay, so let's deal with that. If the hammer isn't cocked, it doesn't get the cylinder to turn, and thus the mechanism cannot engage. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. If you're not a gun expert, you might find it a bit difficult to understand. But they say the analysis additionally included testing of and documentation of the sear engagement points of the hammer as it moved from the position of at rest all the way down against the frame to its lowest position through each engagement of the single action hammer mechanism. The firearm possessed a quarter and half cock position safeties, which means, and I don't know how many of you guys watched some of this. If you saw weapons experts, and I think Scott Reich was one of those who showed his revolver, if you just cocked it slightly, then it went into a quarter cock position, like 2 millimeters. Then it was already in like a cock position, right? To cock it any less than that is almost like not cocking it at all. So they go on to say these quarter and half cock position safeties were found to function as designed, keeping the hammer from striking a cartridge primer without pulling the trigger. Additionally, at half cock, the cylinder is or was partially rotated, making it impossible for the hammer to do its thing. Okay. And then this was a big surprise, number 10. We're halfway through. This was really a big surprise for me. This was something I didn't know. Did you know that gunpowder residue kind of has its own signature? You get certain residues that tell you it's from that kind of cartridge, and then you get another residue that tells you it's from that kind of cartridge. Did you know that? Did you? So what that tells you is that the round that killed Helena didn't actually come from PDQ Prop arms and prop. That's a surprise. You would have thought that it had to, or that it did. And because of this explosive powder that they found, it seems like that the round, so someone asked a question earlier, how did a live round get on set? It looks like Hannah brought it onto set. Right? So also note the word, let me put this onto screen. I hope I've got it, yeah. Can you guys see a word that is in bold in that text that's on screen? Can you see a word that is in bold? Do you see it there? It's one word that's in bold. The word not is bold highlighted in the affidavit, and I think it's the only word, I'd say this under correction, but I think it's the only word, if not the only word, it's one of very, very few rare instances where there is a highlight. And look at what they're saying. They say, the smokeless powder in the live rounds found at the scene did not match the live rounds seized from the props arm supply in question. This means the live rounds on Rust did not match the rounds explosive chemistry taken from PDQ arms and prop. And so by inference, what is that telling you? I can't believe we're still getting this question coming up. You sort of wonder, are there bots out there that your job is just to keep saying, it's not an actor's job. It's like what he said in the ABC News interview. Okay, let's say it 1,000 times. It's not an actor's job to check. Okay, again, it's not as an actor's job to check. Like, at what point do you sort of think about what you're saying? At what point do you get out of that sort of zombie, like, I've been told this and now I'm going to just repeat it. I'm not going to listen to anything else. I'm just going to repeat it over and over again. It's not an actor's job. It's not an actor's job. It is an actor's job. It is an actor's job to check. Sorry, it's just really, yeah. Thanks, Stephanie. Thank you for saying that. Oh, I wasn't told anything by anyone. I don't actually think, I think there's some people here who aren't here that they don't want to learn anything. They're here to tell you what they know, which is that they don't know. So yeah, it was his job. It was his job. Okay. So isn't that an incredible surprise that you could say Hannah didn't do what you're supposed to do, but it actually looks like the live round didn't come from PDQ. So where did it come from? And I think you could argue, or you could suggest, or you could infer that if it didn't come from PDQ and Hannah was loading it, and we're going to deal with what else Hannah was also doing, doesn't it look like Hannah may have actually brought the live round onto the set? Something else that I didn't find here, thanks a lot, Margaret. Something else that I didn't find here was in this probable cause thing. In the 551-page investigative report, there is a reference to Hannah looking in the trunk of a vehicle for dummy rounds, right? Okay, so let's continue. So this is the next page. That brings us to number 11. 6 live rounds were found lying on the Rust set per this report. So do you remember what Baldwin said over and over again? And I guess you could also do that same thing, like the same thing of, it's not an actor's job to check. You could also say, how did a live round, it's like 1 in a billion chance, make it onto the set of my movie. Well, there were actually 5 more. Guess what? There was another live round in Baldwin's bandolier. There's another live round in Baldwin's, I think it's not the bandolier, but it's the holster area. So Baldwin actually was walking around with literally 2 live rounds like against his body. So it's like it's like a 1 in a billion chance. How can a live round? Well, there's actually another one right on you. It's not so 1 in a billion, right? So let's highlight this part over here and this. The FBI determined that 5 suspected live rounds recovered at the scene were indeed live rounds. And the scary thing is where they found these live rounds. It wasn't like in one box. They were all over the place, and they were sort of, it's almost like if Helena wasn't shot with the bullet that killed her, some other bullet that was lying literally on the cart and here and there could have been loaded into a gun and somebody else could have been shot. You don't like get the sense of Helena was extremely unlucky. You kind of get the sense that if Helena wasn't shot, someone else would have been shot. And that, I think, gives you a fairly accurate idea of what you're talking about here. So they say these 5 rounds were found by detectives and crime scene technicians while processing the scene. The 5 unfired rounds were found in the following locations. One from Officer Benavidez's patrol vehicle, right? And he said he seized that from Reed upon his arrival. Now, I'm not quite sure what that means, that he took it out of her hand or what. And then two other live rounds from the top of the armorer's cart. So they literally out in the open on the armorer's cart where there should be dummy rounds. There's another 2 rounds lying there. Now, what do you think is happening with the rounds on the dummy cart? Well, those are going to be loaded into the weapons that are going to be fired later that day, right? Or eventually fired. And then one from Baldwin's holster. Can you see that over there? So Baldwin had one in his holster and another one in his bandolier on the cart, and then another one from an ammunition box located on the armorer's cart. Along with the casing and fired projectile, there were a total of 6 live rounds. That's 0.45 live rounds, right? And what does that tell you? Is that all of these live rounds are actually lying outside of the prop truck. All of these live rounds are sort of just like lying on the set, here, there, and everywhere, right? And so again, that whole idea of there's a 1 in a billion. How did a live round? No. There were 6 live rounds at least. These were the live rounds that they found. Let's do get to number 12. And this is the part that is really irritating with a lot of the folks who keep saying it's not an actor's job, right? This is the thing that you need to think about. Baldwin knew or should have known or was expected to know what the onset safety protocols are. In a way, you can be forgiven for not knowing what they are. All of you are saying it's not an actor's job, blah, blah, blah. Well, it was this actor's job to know what those rules were. Yeah. Thanks, Deborah. So if one of those blowhards that has been defending the suspect, in this case, since day one, and you don't know standard safety protocols on a film set, right? This is not standard safety protocols in your home or in a courtroom, like Nomi was saying. And that's something someone passed on to me. But Kurt Nomi said blah blah blah. That's not the protocols in a courtroom. Or the last time you went to a shooting range, it's the standard safety protocols on a film set. Do you know what they are? Do you know that they exist? So if you don't know these protocols and you took what Baldwin told you at face value, no wonder you found the investigation into Baldwin frivolous. But in a way, weren't you played for a bit of a fool? Somebody told you something and you accepted it at face value. Well, either you knew better and you knew the law better in this case, or you didn't. And it looks like 60% of you knew better. 6% say Alec is innocent. Okay, let's go on to, do you guys want to see this text? I think it's quite important just to spend a moment on it for those who just have not been thinking about it. This is from the probable cause affidavit. Evidence further shows that Baldwin, as an actor who has extensive experience in the film industry involving firearms, failed to demand at least 2 safety checks between the armorer and himself, and witnessing the handling of firearms by a first assistant director. Okay, now please say, but the actor's not supposed to do the check. Standard protocol is the armorer is to show the actor the firearm. You're telling me Baldwin didn't know that? The standard protocol is for the armorer to pull the bullets out in front of the actor and demonstrate that there are no live rounds but dummies in the firearm. Baldwin knows this is standard safety protocol. He's mentioned it in media interviews and also in law enforcement interviews, right? In other words, it's the actor's job to see that whole safety thing taking place, right? So it goes on to say, Hannah did not do this protocol in front of Baldwin. Baldwin did not object to this action. Reed discusses in her interviews and law enforcement that this should have occurred. So somehow this very green, uncertified armorer knows that you're supposed to do this, but Baldwin didn't know this. Reed also acknowledges in her interviews she should have been in the church with a firearm at all times. Did you guys know that? According to the protocols and the standards and the rules, Hannah should have been inside that church. And if she had been inside the church and he was doing those cross draws the way he was doing it, do you think she would have said something? If he was doing the cross draw and the gun was sort of floating like this from left to right, bear in mind on the other side, there are 4 or 5 people. Do you think she would have said something? Reed also acknowledges in her interviews that she should have been in the church with the firearm at all times. Instead, she left the church while Baldwin was in possession of the firearm in close proximity to the cast and crew. Baldwin further acknowledges that it is standard protocol for armorers to stay with the firearm at all times in the media and interviews. Finally, Baldwin directly pointed a firearm at Hutchins and Souza. Whether guided by directions or not, Baldwin knew the first rule of gun safety is never point a gun at someone. Now, to be fair, in all of this, I don't think they say anywhere that the actor has to check it himself. What they do say is the actor's got to see that the check takes place. So either he can see that by doing it himself, or he can see it by having someone do it for him. But in either case, that didn't happen. Do you see what we're saying? Okay. I've also got to say, I don't think you needed to know even the basic protocols of a film set to know, even in real life, you don't aim a gun at someone and pull the trigger, kill them, and then expect that there's not going to be any consequences. So That's the part that I kind of have the most difficulty with, is a situation like this where someone does something and then someone dies, and people are saying, I don't think there should be any consequences for that. I made a mistake. I killed someone. I don't think there should be any consequences for that. That part kind of aggravates me. It seems to suggest it's okay to kill someone by accident, blah, blah, blah. I pulled out my gun. The gun went off. Somebody died. Sorry. It was an accident. So that's okay. I was driving. I looked down at my cell phone. I killed someone. I didn't mean to do it. Sorry. I didn't do anything wrong. There shouldn't be any consequences. Sorry, I just looked down at my phone while I was driving. I didn't mean to kill anyone. So it's okay. It's okay. It's okay what I did. I don't understand. I just looked down at my phone. It's okay. Somebody died. I didn't mean to do it. It's okay. It's okay that somebody died. No, it's not okay. You know, if it was okay, you could have people go around saying, yes, I killed someone, but because I said it was an accident, I should be able to get away with it. I didn't mean to kill that person. It was an accident. I should be allowed to get away with it. So if you take this culpability question in this case, it doesn't begin and end with who put a live round in the gun. On a film set, it's a much wider question. It's about, and I hope you guys have noticed it, it's about not just what happened in the church in that moment. It's about general standards, general precedents, general protocols, general attitudes, and what were they? And that's a much easier case to prove, right? You might think, you might have thought, if you watched an ABC News interview, that it was an isolated incident, it was an accident, it was a freak, 1 in a million thing. If that was true, then it probably wouldn't have happened. But if that was true, then Alex is totally fine in the legal sense. But the flip side is, if there were lots of these other incidents and he knew about them, he didn't do anything about them, then it's not fine. And then what turns out to be the case? It's not one reckless deviation or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. It's 12. And that's in the long period preceding October 21st. It's not one little deviation here and there. It's 12. It's a lot. That's also why the Health and Safety Council gave them the heaviest possible fine. Not because it was 1 or 2 little mistakes, but because it was serious. So these were the 12 reckless deviations. A, not receiving required firearms training. B, did not check the firearm with the armorer present. You know what that means is he can check the firearm with the armorer present, or the armorer can check the firearm with him present, where they, between the two of them, they see, okay, it's safe, right? You don't have the armorer in a different room checking, and then she goes and gives it to him. Well, then does he know that the armorer checked? And that's exactly kind of the story that we've been asked to believe. Anyway, C, letting the armorer leave and then pointing the gun at someone in her absence. D, apparently accepting the firearm from someone else besides the armorer. And I'm not even sure if that's entirely accurate. I don't know whether it's true that the armorer gave the gun to Halls and Halls gave it to Baldwin. I don't know if I believe that, to be quite honest. The next one, E, not dealing with safety complaints on set. If set safety meetings weren't scheduled as necessary, putting his finger on a real gun during a rehearsal, right? H, not using a replica during a rehearsal. These are all rules. These are all protocols. pointing the gun directly at two people, not just one, Hutchins and Souza. Next one, J, handling of the firearm in a negligent manner, which led to the discharge. H, as an expert in the industry with over 40 films under his belt, and as a producer, and as the primary producer of this production, Baldwin ought to have ensured minimum safety standards were met on set. So you either had the situation here where he said, guys, this is not acceptable, we need to do this. Or they took their cue from his attitude to safety. Which one do you think it was? And then there's also I, Baldwin himself not taking safety training seriously by taking or making calls. That's according to Gutierrez Reed during her training. Okay, so that's the next page. Okay. Now, so 14. Did you guys know Hannah wasn't a certified armorer and had no certifiable training? Did you guys know that? So make sure you vote if you haven't voted. Did you predict this outcome? 60%, 2/3, almost 2/3 of you say you did. Okay. Let me highlight this. Did you guys know that Hannah wasn't a certified armorer? So you've got someone who's not certified on a cowboy movie. If you look at the image behind me, look how many guys are there, and they've got guns in their holsters, right? Now you've got an armorer and she's not even certified. Baldwin allowed an inexperienced person to be hired and failed to establish precautions to deal with the situation or take any active steps to mitigate those risks. So according to the affidavit, that they basically say, as the primary producer and also as an experienced actor and the originator of this whole thing, but also someone who's experienced, shouldn't he have said something about this very green, very young armorer, right? That's the first thing that they're sort of arguing. The other thing they're arguing is they're saying, well, I suppose you could potentially let that slide. You could allow her on the set, but what if you took certain precautions? And one of the precautions could have been, could there have been an armorer mentored? And there was talk of that. There was sort of rumors that Seth Kenny had that position, that he was mentoring the armorer and that he was helping her, only for them to say, that's not true. And only for him to say, that's not true. But if you had something like that, if you had someone who was helping Hannah, then that would show that there was an attempt to mitigate the risk, but there wasn't that. Pink Diamond says it was a money problem. Okay, so this page, I'll just read the top of it. It says, basic firearm safety protocols and industry standards are provided during this training, which includes basic firearm safety rules and the mindset, including but not limited to not touching, etc., etc., etc. The evidence clearly indicates that Baldwin recklessly ignored these rules on multiple occasions, resulting in the fatal shooting. Now, to me, the thing that's interesting is in the ABC News interview, he seems to create the impression that either these rules don't exist or that there's sort of old school rules that he's always followed and that's served him well. And remember what he said, if you do things different, good for you, good for you. No, it's not good for you. It's good for everybody. It's good. Everyone needs to follow these prescriptions. The same thing as when you get in your car, there's a code of conduct on the road, right? Everyone is supposed to stop at a red light. Everyone is supposed to X, Y, and Z. It's not good for you. It's everyone is supposed to follow these things. And it's not like, well, not really, it's not the driver's job to look in the rearview mirror. Actually, it is. It is your job to care about safety. Okay, number 15, previous weapons discharges were mentioned multiple times. I felt like I was saying this till I was going mad, that you had previous weapons discharges, and the fact that nothing was being done about that and it wasn't being acknowledged. And even in the sort of PR on Instagram and the comments, like, no, there wasn't any, I don't know why the crew are saying people are telling lies. We were a well-oiled machine. No. Were there previous weapons discharges or not? Well, we knew very early on that there were. Okay, so what is your approach to that? You knew there was a discharge. What did you do about it? And I'm sure he will say, there's no way I knew about that. Well, shouldn't he have known as the primary producer? Didn't other people know about it? Did Lane Looper attempt to communicate the safety issues to the people around him? Was there like a reasonable chance that if you were the lead actor or the primary producer that you would have or should have heard about this stuff? If you were the armorer, should you have heard about it? If you were the armorer, should you have told someone about it? Etc., etc., etc. Exactly. Okay. So, I mean, the bottom line with previous weapons discharges were mentioned multiple times. How come we are aware of them? How come I'm aware of it, you're aware of it, 60% of us are aware of it, but those people on the set weren't aware of it? How does that work? How come we know about it? I know about it. How come they didn't know about it? So that's this page. So yes, just a little bit of a recap on those discharges. If you didn't know about it, prior to the shooting incident, another negligent discharge was committed by a stunt double as he was handling or manipulating a lever action period rifle. It was loaded and left unattended with a stunt performer while in a holding tent. Baldwin failed to act, and evidence shows, to address this reckless situation or to direct Reed to mitigate or address the negligent discharge. Now, you would imagine if you are having safety briefings every day, as you're supposed to have them every day, if safety is a priority, that these discharges would come on people's radars and they'd be like, cheap as shit. This shouldn't have happened. Let's sort it out. But because these safety briefings aren't taking place, it's almost like, oops, accidental discharge. Well, let's pretend that didn't happen. Let's kind of get on. Are we filming the movie Rust or Rush? Let's kind of rush to the next thing, right? So there was another accidental discharge with Sarah Zachary, that someone who worked right alongside Hannah, where she kind of shot herself in the foot, not with a live round, but with a kind of, I guess, wadding. But nevertheless, I think she was injured in her foot. I'm just trying to see if that's over here. Anyway, it's somewhere. So here it says, on October 20th, the original camera crew, that's the day before Alina died. If they just paid attention on that day, right? So you had all of these things happening and this and that and this violation. They just stopped on that day and said, guys, I think we need to take stock. Let's just slow down. What's happening? Alina's life could have been saved. They just said, something's happening here. Half the crew or 6 members of the crew have quit. something serious is going on as far as they're concerned. Let's acknowledge that Alina's life could have been saved just in that moment. And they didn't quit because of somebody stubbed their toe. They cited safety concerns. Also, commute times and distances, pay, and other issues, but safety came up in terms of COVID and weapon safety. And I think they mentioned they mentioned special effects going off as well, like an explosive discharge going off. And they also mentioned other accidental discharges as well. And then the very next day, oh, we've heard about these concerns about safety, maybe have a safety briefing on that day. The day that Alina died, there wasn't a safety briefing. Instead, a new crew was brought in to begin filming right away. What does that show you? Oh, they're gone, we'll just get some other people in. It's almost like the same approach to hiring Hannah. We just need a face in that position. Let's do our thing. Let's get this movie made. Okay. So how's this for a kind of a fact that basically just tells you all you need to know? Number 16. By day 13 of the shoot, right? So almost 2 weeks into the shoot, there'd only been 3 or 4 safety briefings. Now, there's supposed to be a mandatory safety briefing, I think, that the entire crew are supposed to attend, right? That's protocol. And by day 13, there'd only been 3. What does that tell you? That they were basically only having a safety briefing once every 4 days or so, and people attended it if they wanted to, kind of situation. That's a good point. That's something we also forget sometimes. Alina was actually in tears over what had happened. So let me say that again. The rules require daily safety briefings. And so just that deviation, just not having daily safety briefings means, oh, that's how we are dealing with safety in this movie. Imagine if you got onto an aeroplane. Like, let me ask you just this question. If you get onto an aeroplane and do you know, like before the aeroplane takes off, there are kind of 2 or 3 things that happen. One is that some people in the crew will give you a safety briefing, right? Does it or does it not happen on every single flight you've ever been on? Before the plane takes off, someone on the crew stands in front of you and they give you a safety briefing, right? That's the first point. The other one is, before the plane takes off, do the struts and ailerons, do they sort of do this? Right? So if you were on an aeroplane and no safety briefing by the air hostess or whoever, and the pilot doesn't do that thing with the thing before takeoff, would you be like, yeah, that's fine, cool, now let's get this plane in the air? How would you feel about that? How do you feel about that? If you flew with an airline that just, okay, no, man, we really, let's not waste time with that. Let's just get into the air. Flaps, they work, don't worry about it, let's go. How would you feel about that? Right? Now, this was a movie where they weren't doing that. And they weren't doing that one day, and then another day, and then another day. And then they would do it. And then a day would go by. Can you see? It's that approach that's unacceptable. It's that approach where something can fall through the cracks, and that's exactly what did happen. And you could say, as a passenger, it's not my job to be responsible for safety. So you might be sitting on that plane saying, it's not my job to care about safety, it's a pilot's job. Also, you could say it's not the crew's job on the plane to care about safety. It's the guy running the airline's job. No, it's actually everyone's job. It's a collective culture and a collective effort. It's a standard thing. And if that standard thing isn't happening, somebody should say something. You should say, Cheapers, this isn't right. Do you guys know about safety? Because every other airline does this. Okay, that's quite a good point, right? So on Rust, there was less than one briefing every 4 days, and I think the results of that speak for themselves. So that then summarizes it. There was a climate of recklessness on the set. And that's also the point I was trying to make through all of these 90 videos in that playlist. This happened, and that happened, and that happened, and this, and that, and that. Wasn't there a climate of recklessness on set? And I didn't use the word climate, I used the word culture. Wasn't there a culture of recklessness, a culture of not caring as much as they were supposed to care? And if that is true, then cumulatively, it's not just one thing, cumulatively, all these little things that aren't done, doesn't that mean that this wasn't actually an accident, but an accident waiting to happen? In other words, in a climate of not caring about safety, things go wrong. In a climate of driving recklessly, things go wrong. Thanks a lot, Sharon. Appreciate it. Right? The same, in a way, applies in the same way that this affidavit is put together, is the same way you'll see court cases like when Coburg is put on trial, if he is, unless there's a plea deal. The Murdoch case, it's not just one piece of evidence that makes or breaks the case. It's usually not that. Juries are made to think that and believe that, and often deceived into that. Like, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. It's not just one simple thing. It's not reductionist like that. It's cumulatively, what are we talking about? And social media loves to believe there's one absolute big red flag, smoking gun, and it all comes down to this, right? No, it's a cumulative thing. It's a cumulative thing. Deborah says the rules were blatantly ignored and a person was killed. I mean, we knew months and months ago when that report came out and they fined Rust, the whole production, the maximum. We knew what we were talking about. And Baldwin's response, I think through his lawyer, was to say, you know what, they found the producer's liable. I've actually been acquitted from that. Was he? And I think the armorer said something similar. You know what, they found the producer's liable. That shows that they haven't actually accused me, did they? Did you guys know? So obviously I've just told you there was a climate of recklessness. There were only 3 to 4 safety meetings out of 13 days of shooting. And that included the day of the incident. And that to me, and I dealt with this in my analysis. I dealt with the day before. I dealt with what happened in the morning of the incident, what happened during the incident. I dealt with the hours after the incident. I dealt with the days after the incident. I dealt with the weeks after the incident, right? But the thing that really beggared belief was this whole idea of these 6 crew members have just left the set saying we're complaining about safety, whatever. And it was just like, just replace them. You know, we're not going to pay attention to them or their concerns. You know, they're not part of the solution here. Let's just get somebody else. You know, that was like, let me put it like this. If they had honored those concerns, the Rust movie probably would have been completed. And I mean, sincerely, authentically, genuinely honored that. If they'd said, either we don't want you to leave, what are your concerns? Let's sort them out. If they'd done that, maybe the Rust movie would have been completed. I wouldn't bet on it because, I mean, if you had 6 live rounds lying around, I don't know. But if there'd been a safety protocol meeting that morning, maybe Hannah herself would have said, hey, you guys know what's going on here? I've got to be there when this happens. Who knows? Who knows? So on the day of the actual incident, the original camera crew resigned, citing safety issues, and you still had fucking safety issues continuing after that. And in a way, because this camera crew resigned, they saved their own lives. And what I mean is, because this is really something that a lot of people don't know, because that camera crew resigned, they would have been in that church, right? Instead of Helena and Joel. Let me put this a different way. If that camera crew hadn't resigned, then Helena and Joel probably would have been outside the church looking at the footage on a second monitor. They wouldn't have even been inside the church. And so if that camera crew hadn't quit, Helena probably would have been alive today, Joel not shot, but possibly or probably someone else would have been shot. Lane Looper could very well have been shot. It puts things into a kind of staggering perspective. You stand up for safety and it can save your life. You on an aeroplane and you don't like what you see around you, it can actually save your life. Number 19, and this is not in the affidavit, something that I am highlighting, and maybe I just didn't read it carefully enough. And I think in that respect, I'm going to put the link in chat, so maybe you guys can check it out. But as far as I have read, there's nowhere in this affidavit saying that Hall's called out cold gun. I can't find it anywhere. Yeah, that's the movie plot. A child accidentally shoots someone and the grandfather takes him on the run. The grandfather says, we're going to make sure you don't get into trouble for this, and we're going to shoot the law enforcement that come after us. Isn't that in a weird way something that followed this film? It was almost a movie plot that turned into reality, right? Yeah. So if you guys are interested in reading all the pages of the charging document, but as I understand it, it's not in the charging narrative that Hall's called out cold gun, and you would imagine it should be. And I think part of that question addresses something that is bugged me throughout all of this. And it's a very basic question. Who did give Baldwin the gun? Now, what would most of you say? The assistant director, Dave Halls, gave Baldwin the gun. Is that what you guys say? Let's do a quick poll. Who do you think gave Alec Baldwin the gun? Dave Halls or Hannah? Dover and Dolly says Halls. Songbird says Halls. Anyone else? Jalmi Paredi says Halls. Becky says Halls. Galsi says, I don't know. Yvonne says Halls. Hannah was outside. Susan says Halls. So far, I just see everyone saying Halls. Terry Dean says Hannah wasn't in the building. Helena says, I don't know. Melstella says Dave Halls. Okay, so I might be blowing your socks off when I say this. Baldwin said that Halls gave him the gun and said cold gun or yelled cold gun or whatever, right? And that's in the ABC News interview, right? Did you know that when Joel Souza was asked about what happened, and this is the same day, this is before he got surgery while the slug was still in his shoulder, literally an hour and 90 minutes or so after he was shot. When he described what happened, you know what he said? He said that the armorer gave Baldwin the gun. Now, who would be in the best position to know that? Did you know that? Did you know that? And it's I'm not making this up. There's actually audio from the body cam of Joel saying that the armorer gave Baldwin the gun. What do you think about that? So the question then is, if the armorer did give Baldwin the gun, why would you say that Halls gave me the gun? I've got my own thoughts about it. Okay. So it's not in the charging narrative that Halls calls out cold gun. And to me, if he did call out cold gun, and if he said, yes, I did call out cold gun, that would be in the charging narrative. That would be part of the story. And that brings us to point number 20, and then we're going to deal with 4 of my own insights that come from the investigative report. Besides reckless deviations in general, there were at least a dozen reckless acts or omissions in the minutes after lunch leading up to the shooting, not including Baldwin's own acts. And this is the part that, again, really annoys me. It's like this idea, are we not going to talk about that safety was an issue on the Russ set? Are we going to like look through this sort of keyhole and say it's only about how did a live round get onto the set? And then you've got all of these safety issues like all over the place. No. It's not about that. It's not the actor's responsibility. I don't know. I just find it bizarre. Yvonne says, you can't leave us hanging like that. Why blame Halls? Shall I address that? I don't want to address it too directly, but what I will say is I think it's too muddy responsibility. So in other words, if Hannah gives the gun to Baldwin, right, then Baldwin in a way has got to acknowledge that he's using this junior armorer, right? And there's like a direct issue there. And also one of the protocols is that you need double checking, right? I don't know if you noticed it earlier. one of the protocols is you can't just have one person checking for live rounds, you need two. So the whole thing of handing it over to the assistant director makes that happen, right? The other issue is that by Halls being an intermediary, and Halls isn't, according to the rules, the assistant director isn't responsible for for gun safety. The armorer is responsible for that. That's not the same as saying it's not the actor's responsibility. In terms of the role of the assistant director, his job isn't weapon safety. And that's not to say that he wasn't allowed to do that. It's just that it's not really his role. And so by bringing Halls into this relay, it's possible that you create a situation where someone isn't necessarily responsible. Does that make sense? So in a narrative sense, I won't say it absolves responsibility, but it muddles it up a little bit. Have I made myself clear in that? Does that argument make sense? So anyway, as a result of all of this, Baldwin has been charged because he did what he did without due caution on a movie set. It's not about accident or anything. It's about, were you careful enough? And, you know, I can play you that clip where he cross draws and the gun does that a few times. Just that on its own, that clip where he cross draws, bear in mind, inside that gun in that moment is a live round. Now, let me ask you a question. You are Helena. You know there's a live round in that gun. Would you want to be facing this? Thanks a lot, Flower Goddess. Appreciate it. Why is it not playing? Now, what I want to emphasize with this, let's stop it there. What I want to emphasize with this is there's a live round right now in the gun, and I think there's also one in the bandolier, and I think there's also one in the holster belt that Baldwin. So Baldwin actually has 3 live rounds on his person right there. But the important thing is there's a live round that if you pull the trigger right now in the position that he's in, then the live round's going to discharge and it's going to tear through whatever's in its path. Now, you might think that the angle that Helena is looking at all of this through is from the bottom, but it's not. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Appreciate it. Thank you. That's the camera angle. Helena is not on the floor looking from the ground up. Helena is standing there looking kind of into a monitor right there, right? And so when he's pointing the gun, he's actually pointing it towards sort of this part of her body, like under the armpit. And I guess she's got one arm maybe holding the dolly, whatever it is, right? But the point is, and I'm playing devil's advocate in a way. Thanks a lot, Marcia. If you knew what we know now and you are standing in front of that gun, right? And you know there's a live round in it, what do you think you would say? Would you say, would you allow, first of all, would you want to be standing there? Secondly, would you say, cross draw again, cross draw again? Would you mind the gun being pointed at you, but you know there's a live round in there? You standing there, and as I say, you're not at the angle that the camera is, you are right in front of that gun. And someone gave me a hard time saying that she wasn't fired point blank. Well, she was fired literally at arm's length. That's how far away it was. I call that point blank. I call that point blank. It was close enough that the gaffer got gunshot residue on his glasses, and he felt like a whooshing noise. That's point blank. Would you want to be standing there in front of the gun, right there? Would you want to be standing there? You know there's a live round in it. Would you want to be standing there? Would you want someone to be drawing over and over again and pointing the gun at you? And I think that brings it into stark reality, what you're talking about here. Someone made a really good comment, is that if Baldwin had to pretend to commit suicide, right, in the scene, do you think he would have checked the rounds? In other words, if it was Baldwin facing the gun, do you think he would have checked the rounds, checked for dummies? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So as a result of all this, Baldwin has been charged because he did what he did without due caution, and thus he's been charged with negligent use of a deadly weapon. And that's from this last page. Okay. And then the last couple of things I want to highlight here. Did you, and these are all like did you knows, 4 did you knows. And this is going to test how well you know this case all of this time later. Did you know that Hannah was actually in the church? Did you know that? That Hannah was in the church? Did you know that? So Silent Murmur says, how is it that the second person wounded, that's Joel, was brought to hospital earlier, right? The answer is that Helena's wounds were a lot more serious, and they were trying to stabilize her. So they were trying to do 2 things. They were trying to stop the bleeding, right? She had, and I've showed previously a picture of her shirt and it's full of blood. She had a serious injury going into the side of her chest under her arm, and then it hit her spine, paralyzing her, and then actually deflected and came out her back, right? So what they were trying to do is they were trying to stabilize her. They were trying to, in terms of the blood loss, they're trying to mitigate the blood loss. The other thing is they'd given her, they'd given her certain medication, which has a minimum period that you've got where you allow that stabilizing, you allow the stabilizing influence to set in. You're not allowed to move someone during that period. So it's really that they were trying to stabilize her and save her life. She was far more critically wounded, and the reason they didn't move her was because she was deteriorating quite quickly. They were trying to stabilize her, and that's why they didn't move her. Does that make sense? So I asked earlier, did you guys know that Hannah was in the church that day after lunch? Did you guys know that? Yeah, stabilized before transporting. That's also just a medical protocol. So the first sort of insight from these 551 pages is that according to page 191, shall I put that on screen? Let's do that. So it says here, I asked Hannah if it was her responsibility, so that's from law enforcement, to check the guns after lunch, and she advised only if they are going onto set. She advised she did check the firearm after lunch and also checked it with Dave. I asked Hannah if she did any additional inspections with the firearm. She said she did check the barrel for any obstructions. I asked Hannah what the last round, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's go to the last paragraph here. Let's just take myself out of it. Hannah advised she wasn't sure how a live round would have gotten into the box, and she checks them to the best of her ability. Hannah advised she was walking in, this is the part to emphasize, she was walking in the church when she was shaking the round in her ear. And I must say, that blew my mind. It's like, you're supposed to be carefully listening to the sound of that like ball bearing rattling in the gun, in the bullet. And meanwhile, she's walking while doing the check. That absolutely blew my mind. Like, the first way I imagined it is she's sitting in the prop truck, kind of by herself. And I mean, that's not how it's actually done. You do it with someone else present. But the idea I had in my mind was she's taking one bullet out, one by one, shaking it, getting a sense, okay, you know what I mean? There's no noise, there's no radio on. It's like I need to hear the sound of the ball bearing rattling inside the round, right? And instead of that, you get this idea she's literally walking, right, where there could be sounds and whatever, and she's holding a round in her hand, shaking it next to her ear while she's walking, while she goes into the church, stomp, stomp, stomp. And that's a very easy way to not hear something or not notice something that you don't hear. Isn't that unbelievable? Shall I blow it up so you can, just to emphasize it? Let's do this. Can you see that Hannah advised she was walking in the church when she was shaking the round in her ear and thought she heard the sound of a dummy round? She thought she did. Obviously, she didn't. I asked when someone would have had the opportunity to put a live round in, to which Hannah advised there were times the gun and cart were left unattended. Doesn't that kind of blow your mind? Okay. So the other thing that stands out to me just reading that is if she's walking into the church, and I don't know why, my impression based on all the reports I've read was that she wasn't allowed in the church and she was in the prop truck and this, that, and the next thing. And Halls was the go-between. Now we're getting the story that she was actually did walk into the church and she was actually sort of checking for dummy rounds sort of inside the church, right, while she's walking around. It's not like she's calm, cool, and collected in a what's the word, in a static, motionless situation. Can I hear if it's a dummy round? She's kind of doing other things. She's moving around. And so what this raises is the possibility that couldn't she have given Baldwin the gun directly? I mean, she was in the church. I'm just saying it suggests that she may have handed the weapon directly to Baldwin after all. And wasn't that part of a slapdash approach to safety? If this is true, and I'm simply asking a question, if it's true, then Hannah was not sitting and checking and loading rounds one by one, but rather loading rounds on the fly, as it were. You kind of imagine that you sit in front of a table or some kind of platform and you take the bullets out and you put them like on a flat surface in front of you, one by one, and then you check each one, put it in, check each one, put it in. Sort of, if you're walking around, how are you doing those checks other than do you stick your hand into your moon bag or into your pocket or wherever, and you pull out a couple of rounds and then you pick one and you shake it, next one, kind of thing? You know, is it very organized or systematic, that kind of approach? And what if you, in the middle of checking around and someone says, hey, hand over that firearm, we're in a hurry here, right? That brings us to the second of these 4 insights. Did you guys know that Jensen Ackles, and as I said earlier, it's his image behind me. Did you know that he said, it's in the 551-page report, that he checked his own firearm on the Rust set? Did you guys know that? So Jensen Ackles checked his own firearm. Why didn't Baldwin? It's not an actor's job. So anyway, this is where it comes from. Let's do that. Jensen Ackles came into the sheriff's office at about 10:45 a.m. on Monday, November 1st, for an interview. He advised his role in regards to Rust was one of the main actors. He advised he had been on the scene practically every day since the beginning of filming. And I think it should be, and handling firearms frequently since it was part of his character. He advised during his time of filming, he consistently performed his own self-checks of the weapons he was using. Let's get rid of that. Let me repeat that. Can you see from over there, that line there? So Jensen Ackles advised during his time of filming on Rust, he consistently performed, not he did it once or he did it twice, he did it every single time. He consistently performed his own self-checks on the weapons he was using. Where did he get that silly idea to do that? Where did he get the crazy idea to actually check the gun himself every single time? So yeah, we've got another person saying it's not the actor's job to check the gun. So are you saying someone should have said to Ackles, please stop checking the gun. Please don't do that. You think someone needed to say that to him? Do you think other actors should have also been told, please, in the name of safety, don't check your gun. Please, we need you not to check your gun. Anyway. So would it be fair to say that Baldwin was too important to do safety checks, or is it not about that? Is it not about that? Do you think that saying that maybe Baldwin just felt like the rules don't really apply to me? We think that's totally unacceptable and inappropriate to say. Have the rules of this case applied to him at any point all along this whole story? Or not? No, I know what the rules are. I'm very sensitive to them. So it's also interesting to note that Ackles said, that's Jensen Ackles, said that he saw Hannah enter the church after lunch. So we've now got 2 people, Hannah and another actor, saying that they saw Hannah enter the church after lunch. This suggests possibly there was an agreement from somebody to say that Halls had handed Baldwin the gun. And this is where I sort of addressed what I didn't want to say earlier. Maybe that was done to make things seem more professional. Maybe that was a narrative that was agreed upon to make things seem more organized than they really were, right? I'm saying maybe, I don't know. But I do think it's very interesting that part of his statement was that he said, can you see over there? Let's do this. He says, Jensen said he believed that he watched Hannah go inside the church after lunch. There's no question about when we're talking about. It's not that she went into church some other day. We're talking about after lunch. Isn't that a bit of a surprising twist to this whole story? I thought Hannah was in prop truck and she was never allowed in the truck. She wasn't in the church because she wasn't allowed in the church. Who cares says, well, you should change your avatar for true crime. It should be I care, or I care a lot. Anyway, the very first day there were rumors about Plinking and then nothing after that. I am going to kind of address that. In fact, I think it's my next point. It's a point after this point. So this is what the 551-page affidavit says about the cold gun. Baldwin insists that Halls handed him the gun and called out cold gun. And we get that right over here. Let's take it down there. I asked Alec if he witnessed Dave take the gun off the cart, to which he advised he didn't see him, but was told he took it off the cart. Alex said Hannah typically would hand him the gun, but this time Dave handed it to him and announced it was a cold gun, which was not typical of how the gun handoff usually goes. So suddenly, just before the incident happens, everything changes. So according to Baldwin, Hannah doesn't hand him the gun or even hand it to Halls in the church. Halls goes outside the church and seems to get the gun off the cart. And then the question is, well, did Hannah and Halls actually talk to each other? Did Hannah demonstrate it to Halls? And then also, I normally get the gun from Hannah, but on this occasion I didn't. I actually got it from Halls. Quite weird, right? Also interesting, when Joel and Elena were shot, and I think this is credit to Dave Halls, when inside the church, when Joel and Elena were shot, Halls immediately came to their aid, right? He rushed to their aid, whereas Alec Baldwin didn't. So, you know, when Alec Baldwin was asked, what did you do? He sort of said, and he was also asked, did Elena say something? Bear in mind, Elena lived 2 hours after she was shot. Joel survived. So, are you not going to talk to your director and ask him how he is? Are you not going to talk to your cinematographer and ask her how she is? She's right in front of you. Well, if you're not going to do that, what are you going to do? I don't know what the answer is, but what we do know is he said something about he stood over her for 60 seconds. And he thought she fainted or may have had a heart attack. Did you not check? You could have asked her. Also, why is Joel screaming? Anyway, the other side of it is, as I say, what does Halls do? Dave described how after the shot was fired, Helena and Joel fell down. Dave said he rushed over to her and asked if she was okay, to which she advised she couldn't feel her legs. He said he remembered Joel being in pain and he told others to call 911 and get a medic inside. Now, that entire narrative is what Dave Halls did. Dave Halls was in the church. And I think you can kind of ask the question, you know, if you're saying that, was Baldwin, did he care about safety? Well, then when someone actually gets hurt right in front of him, does he care then? And I think another way of just addressing that is look at what somebody else does. Not just Dave Halls, but Sergei Svetnoy also does something. He holds her and ends up covered in blood. He talks to her, he tries to comfort her. It's his friend, right? But look at what Dave Halls says. He rushed over to Helena, so he rushes over to her first. He asks her if she's okay. He talks to her. Are you all right? And she says, I can't feel my legs. not a very good, not a very reassuring answer, that. And then he says he remembered Joel being in pain. So you kind of get the idea that he kept attending to Helena. He had a sense that Joel was in pain. And then what did he do? He told others to call 911. He told them to get a medic inside. What did Baldwin do? I don't know what the answer is, but it's a question. What did Baldwin do? And now we're going to deal with Plinking. I don't know whether this is Plinking, but the shocking thing that we're going to deal with now is that Hannah shot with the gun that killed Helena the night before. Hannah was shooting live rounds with the gun that killed Helena the night before. And Hannah is also charged with negligence here. Also, the live rounds, as far as we are aware, didn't come from PDQ. So where do you think they came from? Let me say that again. If Hannah used that gun, not just any gun, that 45, Baldwin's 45, the night before, shot live rounds with that 45 the night before, and the live rounds didn't come from PDQ, well, where else do you think they came from? That is exactly what I said. So let's have a look at these screen grabs. This is also from the report. Can you guys see that? It says, this is from Teresa Davis to Sarah Zachary. Here's the thing. If she truly didn't go shooting with anyone and truly has no idea how that live ammo got on set, guess who they're talking about? Hannah. She should have taken that box immediately to production and said she didn't know where it came from and let shut things down for a bit while they figured it all out. She's responsible even if she didn't use those rounds on her free time. It's abundantly obvious that she didn't check, she didn't do her job properly, and she had plenty of time to do so because we had extra time that morning while camera was fucking off, meaning the camera crew. So she can say what she wants about training time and all that bullshit, but it's not why she killed Helena. She has an interview out from the Nick Cage movie saying she really knows cold peacemakers. What about those guns is so different that she suddenly needed lots of extra training time to be able to remember how to check the bullets that go into them? That is from an email to Sarah Zachary dated 29 October, 8 days after the incident. So here's someone who totally blamed the armorer, right? But what she's talking about here is if she truly didn't go shooting with anyone, what do you think that's talking about? It's, well, didn't she go shooting with someone? And that brings us to the next one. So it says here under that, can you see that highlighted text? During a message thread between Sarah Zachary and Weston Brownlee. Oh, is it Weston Brownlee? Anyway, there's a message from Weston to Sarah discussing the driver of a prop truck and the armorer target shooting. I don't know if you remember, there's some images of Hannah after the shooting, and she's kind of accompanied by a guy with a beard. I don't know whether he's the prop truck driver, but it seemed like a guy that was quite supportive and friendly and looking after her. And so the question is, was this the guy that went with her shooting the live rounds? So here's the next one. Hey, you may know this and it's hearsay, but I'm telling you this because it's info you should have especially given the investigation. I just heard from someone claiming they know the driver of your prop truck that the armorer allegedly went out target shooting last night with the gun Alec had and then fired. There's your box of rounds. You said you don't know where they came from. Given what you told me about the armorer misplacing things and mixing them up, there's the live rounds right there. I would disclose that to the police if that's not info you already knew. So what is going on from Weston Brownlee is, and he's not a direct witness, he's saying, I heard from someone who said they know the driver of your prop truck went target shooting last night. Look at the date that this is sent, 21st of October. Can you see that? Can you see this is dated 21st of October, just before midnight? And so what is last night? Well, it's the 20th of October. So the night before the incident, Hannah went target shooting with a prop truck dude using live rounds with the gun that ultimately killed Alina, according to the story. And so this person's also saying the live rounds came from, you know who, not from PDQ. This is where the live rounds came from. This is the situation that the live rounds came from. And so let's go through one more text. There's also a message from Weston to Sarah discussing an incident of negligent discharges of rifles that happened previously. He says, the two prior discharges of blanks, I heard more details about what happened with Hannah and the rifle, and the general crew should have demanded her termination then. So there was an incident, and he's saying Hannah should have been fired as a result of that in terms of the set, then and there. And the other you told me about, the other discharge you told me about, where you accidentally dropped the hammer, that did happen one day on, I think it's a particular movie, on something like that. You just immediately tell everyone accidental discharge during reload. In other words, he's saying you should have reported that. This is why it happened. This is how we make sure it won't happen again. Right, so it says here, anyway, and so it goes on. And there's quite a lot of this sort of thing out there. So that's my story. And I do think if you have some stamina and you can pay attention to detail, it's really not such a big walk in the park. Of course, if you're going to watch the ABC News interview and for a year keep saying, it's not an actor's job or it was an accident, well, then I don't even know what you're doing following this case. Go on to another case because you've already dealt with it. Let's have a look at the poll. 61% saying, I called it from day one. 7% say Alec is innocent. 21% says the armorer is guilty, but Baldwin isn't. And 12% say it's not the actor's job to check the gun. Okay, so yeah, so that's my story. I hope you found it. I hope you guys have learned something here, certainly in terms of protocols and so on. Now I want to show you something that is totally different. So if you came here to hear about Alec Baldwin and the Rust incident, that conversation's over now. So if you don't want to hear anything else, or if you only want to hear about Alec Baldwin and Rust, then that show is ended, right? And I see 10 people have already left. I'm only here to hear about Alec Baldwin. I'm done talking about that in terms of this thing. Let's see if we can get a few more people to leave. Another person has left. Okay. So what I'm going to tell you about is the weaver. I told you that he made a nest on my birthday, and I was really like rubbing my hands and really happy that he did that. And then he next thing he destroyed that nest, he pulled it to pieces, and then I was a little bit bummed out. Well, guess what? He came back after that, after pulling the nest to pieces, and he's built 2 nests, and they're still out there. They're still up there, right? I also saw something, and I'll put the pictures up for you guys in a moment. I also saw something that I don't think I've ever seen before. I saw a yellow weaver bird, that's the male, busily constructing his nest. And then I saw another yellow weaver bird right on top of it, like literally on the branch that's holding the nest. Like, oh, is that what you're up to? You very, very seldom see 2 males at such close quarters because they're sort of rivals. Susan says he's a perfectionist. So now I'm going to show you the very latest pictures I've got of that weaver. I think we should call him Vincent. He's just so hardworking. And he has kept weaving all along. You know, we talked about if you're in the shadow or in the dark, just keep at it. And he has kept at it. And so these are his latest efforts. So I think you'll agree with me that that is quite a nice nest. It's quite nicely put together. And he's still working on it. He's still weaving. And what's a little bit different about this nest is he's allowed some of the original leaves to be part of the housing, maybe for some extra shade, right? And so I think I took this photo when he was still busy making this first nest. And this has got to be something like nest number 9, right? Nest number 9. That's a lot of effort. And then when I looked again, he'd built another nest. So if you actually go back to that original, that's actually the first nest. You can see how green all of it is, right? And then this is that nest now, and the you can see the leaves are sort of part of it. And now it's already turned a sort of what's the word? Khaki sort of color, an off green color, a pale green color. And Yuri is busy at work on probably at least nest number 10. And look, I don't know what the outcome is going to be of this, but these nests look pretty well executed. And touch wood, so far this nest is still there. The other nest that he made on my birthday, he tore to pieces within a day or so. This nest has been around long enough for it to turn that color. So things are looking good. And so anyway, Yuri is busy at work on another nest. And earlier today, I actually saw him ripping, because he wants his nest to stand out. So anywhere where the other branches that might obscure the view, but I think it's also to do with snakes. They don't want other creatures to be able to get to the nest. He takes those little, he prunes those branches and he snips the little leaves off, right? Yeah, he is a Van Gogh bird. And then I've got one more picture to show you, and this is just the nests. Has he figured it out? Has he kind of, after making 9, 10 nests, has he finally figured out what it takes to make a nest? What do you think? And if you think about it, the person who decides, it's not really a person, the entity that decides whether this nest is acceptable is the female. And one of her primary issues is it safe? Is it a safe place for us to raise a family? Have you put this nest in harm's way, or is this nest in a place where we are going to be taken care of. And so weavers also have safety protocols. And if they don't, if the female allows the male to build one nest and then go for it, you could have a situation where the floor literally falls out of the nest. An egg literally falls through the mesh, or even the baby, or it gets its foot stuck in the material, or whatever it is, right? So even weavers have safety protocols, right? And so they're quite strict protocols. It took this bird 10 nests to, well, we hope, to eventually get where the weaver protocol needs to get to, right? And that's weaver birds. And that's not like a nest isn't something that's supposed to kill you, but if you don't construct it properly, it could seriously injure you. But there's safety protocols with these nests, right? And a lot of effort goes into them. And if someone isn't happy with them, she's the primary producer, in the sense of she's the one that decides we're going to go with this or we're not going to go with this. Do that again, right? She does have high expectations. And he's also a good soldier. He does as he's told. You don't like that nest? Fine. I'll tear it apart. I won't. I might do it with a little bit of attitude, but whatever you say, not good enough, don't worry, I'll build another one, right? If only the crew on the rust set had that same can-do approach to safety. Yeah, good point. So I do have a lot of other pictures. I was sort of running out of time downloading them and trying to get them ready for you guys. So I am hoping to, first of all, I'm hoping that the weaver gets off the ground this time. And if he does, then I'll document the family story. I'll try and get some pictures of the female. And then I'll put all of that onto the Team Peachtree channel. I don't know if one of the mods can put a link of that onto there. I don't really, but we do have puff adders. In fact, I went paddling on my dad's farm and he was like, I just took this footage of a puff adder, but have a nice walk. They're poisonous and, can get a bit of a nasty bite. Didn't Baldwin see the blood? Well, absolutely. So I want to dedicate the Team Peachtree channel to food, fitness, and travel. And so I'm going to be covering that sort of thing when I go somewhere, but also things to do with sport, and then also things to do with nature. On that channel. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. I probably will also, I'll do another Van Gogh letters on this channel. It'll probably be the last one on this channel. And then from then on, all Van Gogh content will move to Team Peachtree. What else can I tell you? My brother took some footage of me swimming, and it's quite strange when you are, and I'm sure this bird feels the same thing. When you are weaving, swimming in a way feels like weaving with water. But when you are doing something, it feels like you know what you're doing, right? Only for somebody else to say, no, that's actually not good enough, right? And so my brother took some footage of me swimming, and I'm quite a strong swimmer, and I actually swam before I did this live. And I thought, wow, I'm actually quite happy with my swimming, and I think my upper body is quite strong or whatever, only to look at this video and realize I can't actually believe that's me. That's not what I thought I looked like at all. the impression I have of myself swimming and actually seeing myself swimming out, they don't really match. And that's the same thing going on with this bird. It's building a nest and it's got an idea of what it thinks is good enough or satisfactory, when somebody else has got a totally different standards in terms of that, or there's a different reality compared to what you think you've done through all of this hard work. And I kind of want to share that with you as well. Is I want to share with you my journey back to fitness, because about 10 years ago, and I'm going to be doing a live with Lisa Wilson about 2 weeks from now, just retracing our journey. But part of the result of going into true crime, I used to do the Ironman, lots of half Ironmans. Was at one point the sixth in the top 6 triathletes in South Africa. I got provincial colors in swimming, in biathlon, in triathlon, in football, just a really good sportsman. And coming out after 10 years in true crime, I'm not quite who I used to be. And part of that's good. I've evolved as a person, but physically, I'm definitely not the weaver bird that I once was, and I want to be. And that's the journey I want to take you onto, is the journey back to health, the journey back to fitness, the journey back to life, and all that kind of thing. So sort of tangential and sort of parallel to the true crime story that we're still going to continue on, I want to take you on another story that takes us back into the real world, but in a practical sense. Real places, real problems. Not that true crime isn't a real problem, but it's just a lot more instrumental. And so I hope you will join me on that journey. Thanks a lot, Liesel. Thanks a lot. There are a couple of other surprises and things I want to share with you, but it's a little bit early to know exactly what's going to happen. But yeah, when I'm ready to share that, I will. But look out for the video that my brother took of me swimming, and I'll be putting that on Team Peachtree, and check it out. And I hope to be putting another video up maybe a month later where the weaving is improved, the nesting is improved, the bird is improved, right? You know what I mean? And I hope that inspires you to improve in your situation, to get your weaving up to scratch, right? Absolutely. Okay, so if you don't have the link, do I have the link? I think it's this one. No, it's not. There's not really a lot of content there, but that's about to change. Head to this channel and subscribe. Oh, okay. Thanks a lot, Dover and Dolly. Thank you. Okay. I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm quite surprised that my cheek has lasted this well. It definitely is still quite tender. It's swollen on the inside, and so I've got to be careful speaking too quickly or chewing too quickly. But thank you all for joining us. Team Peachtree is also a place I want to put more content about this guy and his journey. He's had some adventures of late. Dogs attacking him, and today he seemed to be seemed to be making a girlfriend. So I also want to put some more of Timmy's adventures onto Team Peachtree. I've just felt like True Crime Rocket Science isn't really about Van Gogh and sort of more affirmative stories. So I kind of want to separate them. And so I'll probably be putting Timmy onto Team Peachtree more going forward. Thanks, Stephanie. So yeah, I want to thank all the mods who've been on board and the members, and then also the subscribers. Also, really want to thank my patrons. The situation on Patreon has improved in a good way. So I did thank you guys, but I just want to thank you guys that you see it and hear it coming from me as well. Really do appreciate it. Jennifer says, I feel like the human heart is under attack. Something I also want to talk about, maybe also on Team Peachtree, is the series The White Lotus. Has anyone watched that? I find it incredible. I find the dynamics brilliant. It's not so much criminal psychology, although sometimes somebody dies in that series, but it just covers the conversation around human dynamics and relationship dynamics so well, so authentically, so intimately, so with so much detail, and does such a good job with it. It's just done really artistically, and there are definitely some conversations I want to share with you with regard to the latest series. Maybe we can do a separate live dealing with that. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Yeah, we talk about motive and we talk about all of these dark things, and did he lie, and is there deceit, and did he definitely do that? And things like brains at someone's ankles and all this kind of stuff. And what about, we are alive. We are the survivors. What are we going to do with our lives? That's maybe another thing. What about our motives to live, and how are we going to live? How are we going to find meaning? How do we motivate and inspire ourselves? So instead of those dark motives and dark impulses and criminal things, what about light motives, that take us into a good place, that make society better, that make us better, that make us a more caring and good. If criminals are bad, how do we become better, collectively, but also individually? Also love the White Lotus. Anyway, thanks a lot, everyone, for being here. I hope you found this interesting. If you're watching this on replay, you are allowed to hit the thanks button. I do want to do another book club, actually, on a fantastic book on Neil Armstrong called First Man. I'd love to get to that soon, but I'm not quite sure when that'll be. There are a couple of episodes I need to kind of work through before we get to that. But it does seem like a lot of the high profile cases, some of them are simmering down slightly. The Idaho cases especially starting to, well, gone off the boil. I think you'd agree with that. I agree. I definitely agree with that. Timmy would agree as well. Okay, guys. Timmy, are you ready to basically go and sleep, Timmy? Are you quite tired? You're tired? Shame he's like a zombie. Can you see his beard and mine are almost a similar sort of reddish gray? Mine is just clean, I'd say. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for being here. Mods especially. Stephanie, you must get to sleep, and good luck with your healing. And everybody keep weaving, take care, and I'll see you guys next time. All the best.